The most horrible thing that a mother could ever go through. I mean, the pain was so intense that I thought I was going to die.
It was a brutal way to go. I can just imagine what went through his head.
He was frantically looking for help.
Here we go. He's got a revolver. Probably saw Jeremiah with a pocket full of money. This is going to be an easy robbery.
When this goes to court, people are going to say, just tell us what happened.
He was trying to kidnap us.
He came for me.
We don't know what happened in the car. The jury was left to speculate.
Was there proof that there was a robbery?
What kind of kidnapping is this?
This trial was one of the most difficult decisions of my life.
Can't lie, there's a lot on the line.
We knew what the stakes were.
For those most affected by a homicide, the first 48 is just the beginning. This is the story of the fight for justice in the weeks, months, and years.
I'm calling 911!
This is him.
There's a guy that says he's dying. It looks like he's been shot and there's blood all over his shirt and face.
I have an ambulance on the way. They're coming as quickly as possible. Are you with him right now?
Yes. Hey, are you awake? Oh, God. His pupils are dilated. He's moving. Hey, stop trying to move, man. Stop trying to move, okay?
Is he breathing?
He's not breathing. His body's shaking. Oh, my God. I think he's dead. Cops are here. He just told me to move. He's on the guy right now.
Police start first aid, but it's too late.
As a homicide detective, you can have gut feelings and all that, but you follow the lead of the evidence, follow the facts. My name is Jeff Gatwood. I've been a Tulsa police officer for over 30 years. I'm assigned to the homicide unit.
Things still running?
Sounds like it, doesn't it? Everybody was here pretty quick. When I see this blood trail, and the best way to describe the distance would be about a football field length. And he ran upstairs. Who is this?
I have not heard anything.
Gatwood will wait for the medical examiner to search the victim for an ID.
It looks like at least one gunshot wound, from what I can see.
The victim was shot in the arm, chest, and back.
He ran for his life, and he ran to an apartment to die there. I can just imagine what went through his head at that time. It was a brutal way to go. The car itself, the window behind the driver's side, appeared to have been shot out with a gun. Looks like there's glass coming out the window right here. I'm just formulating in my mind that there must have been a struggle inside the vehicle, and that's where the shooting started. Well, there's a phone right here in the floorboard.
Well, I'm not seeing any casings.
The good thing is we've got cameras on the corners down here. Sergeant Schilling told me he was going to go talk to the department manager and see if maybe we have video. We've had at least 3 or 4 people that have called 911. Hey, sir, did you see or hear anything?
Somebody saw something based on the amount of calls that our dispatch received. My name is Detective Reggie Warren. I'm a homicide detective for the Tulsa Police Department.
I seen him, and he was like, man, call the police, calling him, so I'm about to die.
Well, in the daytime, you have more witnesses. You got people up. You got movement. So we felt pretty confident.
Which way?
The neighbors say there was a second man who ran from the car.
They see a younger black male. They say he's like late teens, early 20s, takes off running west, hits the fence line, heading south. They see him with a gun in his hand.
Then,
somebody's trying to get a hold of whoever owns this phone. I was able to take a picture of the phone number that was calling that phone. You got to roll the dice sometimes. Let's call this number, and hopefully this person will cooperate with law enforcement. All right, I'm heading downtown. This is Detective Gatwood, Tulsa Police Department. I'm calling this number back because the phone that I'm out with, this is the number that was calling it. I'm working a homicide.
The only person that I've called recently is a friend named Jeremiah.
He ended up telling me it was Jeremiah Goldman. He's a white male in his late 20s. It was a very lucky break. Who is Jeremiah Goldman to you? Did you hear me? And then the phone disconnected. And it was frustrating, especially when you're wanting to get these important details. I think I got the victim figured out. I think it's going to be this Jeremiah Goldman.
It looks like him.
Yeah.
28-year-old Jeremiah Goldman was born in Tulsa. A graduate of Bixby High, he worked in construction. He leaves behind his parents, 2 sisters, and a brother.
I've got to get a hold of this guy again that originally was calling him. Maybe this person who's calling can tell me why my victim was where they were at this time. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle for this case. Real quick, who is Jeremiah to you, if you don't mind?
Jeremiah is a friend of mine that I work with, and he was supposed to be going. I just found out that
He says 2 hours ago, Jeremiah went to pick up their pay for their day's work.
you can't get a hold of him.
I was a robbery detective for 9 years. From my experience, I'm thinking maybe they were fighting over money, and then the shooting occurred. A dope deal gone bad, or possible just straight up robbery.
Hey, John.
An update comes in from the crime scene.
The phone was ringing. They talked to the mom.
Jeremiah's mother has been calling the phone that was in his car.
You want them to go up there and talk to her?
Yeah. Detective Warren and Detective Brown go meet with the victim's family to do what we call death notification. Also to figure out the timeline of the day.
What stands out to me is when we walked in the door, the TV was on and the news was playing, and the news was talking about the murder. And the family did not know that what they were talking about was their loved one.
Officers say they are searching for a man who shot and killed another man at this apartment complex.
It kind of hit home with myself and John that we're getting ready to give these people the worst news of their life.
I had 2 detectives coming to talk to me. I'm trying to piece all this together. I really got this in the pit of my stomach. They came in and that's when they said that he was shot. He'd been shot and killed. The most horrible thing that a mother could ever, I mean, that was the worst day. Pain was so intense that I thought I was going to die.
We got video. Here we go.
Security cameras at the apartment complex may have captured the shooting.
They come in this first entrance, crash right there.
There's victim right there, isn't it?
He comes running.
He was frantically looking for help when you know in your mind that you're probably gonna die.
This angle has the back of the apartment complex. This guy fits the description of the suspect. Witnesses described a young black male running to the back of the complex, and we were able to corroborate that from video. It looks like he's got a revolver. Most of these guns that have been taken from burglaries, they get sold to other people, and so these guns are not that difficult to get.
It looked like he pours the shell casings out.
He's high.
He might be under the influence of some kind of narcotics. Here's a real good picture. He's very boyish looking in the face. What I'm liking is him going back that way towards Addison's.
The team believes the suspect was headed for an apartment complex about 5 blocks away from the murder.
Hey, Jeff, I'll put the video online.
Oh, yeah, we've got a suspect. The guy's face isn't covered. That's the icing on the cake. Let's get it out on the media portal.
4 hours in, Brown and Warren have the timeline from Jeremiah's mother.
She says it was about 2:20 that he left the house, saying that he was going to go get money from the boss man. She does not know if he ever met boss man to get money.
Does the boss know anything about this?
I don't know.
You have that phone number? I spoke to Jeremiah's boss. He said he met with Jeremiah at a Quick Trip to pay him for the job. And he gave me a dollar amount that he paid him, which was $160. So you guys were there, give or take, at 2:30. Hey, thank you, sir. All right, bye-bye. So he definitely had money before he was murdered. I'm just wondering if he picked a young cat up there, and then this went south. Somebody knew he had this cash on his person, about $100. That was a substantial amount of money. This murder occurred over robbery.
All we knew is we need to go find this guy, and we need to go find him now.
Look at that. Look at this.
Oh, see how young your Uncle Maya was? Jeremiah, he was the baby of the family. He had such a sweet, kind, gentle heart. Just loving.
This is one of my favorite pictures of him. Those blue eyes. Oh my goodness. Look like glass. They're so pretty.
We loved watching football. Pittsburgh Steelers. Even whenever he moved away, we were like long distance buddies on football. We watched it together, even though we wasn't in the same house together.
Are you okay?
He loved his nieces and nephews, and they adored him. For his sisters and his brother and his dad and I, what a loss.
Huh? Where do you think he's at?
The jungle.
The jungle.
I mean the zoo.
We're healing. We're learning how to cope and deal.
Oh, look at him smiling at you.
We have to. You know, we're forced to have to deal with this. And how do you do that? You know, how do you move on?
Eight hours into the investigation,
Jeremiah's boss said he met with Jeremiah at a Quick Trip. So Detective Moyer with the robbery unit went to Quick Trip and got screenshots of the video security system there. Yeah, that's that vest he had on. Did you see the boss to give him the money out in the front?
Yeah, out in front, yeah. There's a couple pictures of him pulling out of the parking lot. He's by himself at 2:30.
It's the same white car that I seen when I went to the homicide that was crashed in the buildings. It showed a timeline where the victim was before he was murdered. Yeah, he's by himself, so.
Minutes later, he's dead.
We have to find out what happened between Jeremiah picking up the money and from the time he got to the apartment complex.
So is it possible that he just picked somebody up on the road?
Gene, I'm thinking he picked that old boy over at Addison.
When our suspect left the crime scene area, he was walking east towards the Addison apartments. There it is. So next day we go to Addison's. You're the manager here?
Yeah.
I want to talk to people in that complex, especially management. Management's always your key.
Yeah, I know that little boy. He's banned from here. I don't have his name, but...
She takes us to a tenant that gives us a first name.
It's Zach.
And says he lives in the neighborhood next to the complex. So I'm feeling very promising.
What happened?
22 hours after Jeremiah's murder.
Warrant set up on the house. We saw a guy leave from the house.
Patrol stopped Zachariah's father, and he agreed to talk.
The dad was able to convince Zach to surrender without any issues.
All right, we'll just get to this. You basically said that Zach, your son, is at the house.
I feel like I'm just handing them over on the platter, you know, but I gotta do it. I got responsibilities. I got other kids.
For a parent, this has to be extremely hard. I couldn't imagine it. I wouldn't want to imagine it. but what's right is right.
I do feel for his father that he was, you know, basically telling on his son, but also I think it's the right thing to do because somebody's dead.
Go right out here, please.
Zach is located and he's brought downtown. We know we got a great case on Zach because we got him on video at the complex. He's been ID'd by several people at this point, including law enforcement. Me and Reggie, of course, we strategize before we go into the interview.
We got to make him as comfortable as we possibly can. So we don't want to go in there and being the authoritative guys and not have him shut down on us.
Do you have any clue why we're here today?
They saying I'm accused of a murder.
Did you have a gun yesterday with you?
No.
We got video of you out there leaning up against the building, loading a pistol.
I weren't involved because I was on my way back as the police were all there because it scared me too.
I wasn't surprised that Zach lied to us. He knew that what he was basically being accused of could potentially maybe send him to prison for the rest of his life.
I always feel sympathy for kids that age when they screw their lives up like that, you know, because that could have been any one of us when we were that age. Not thinking of what can happen to us in the future. We don't want you to back yourself in a corner that you can't get out of, okay? Because you're doing it. Now, something happened yesterday that went bad. That made a good kid like you do something that you probably didn't want to do.
He picked us up when he was supposed to take us home.
Zach says Jeremiah offered him and a friend named Raymond a ride from a convenience store.
But he didn't do that. He was trying to kidnap us. My friend felt that he had to protect us, so he shot him.
Witnesses saw you and the white guy. This Raymond guy wasn't there. He's a 16-year-old kid. He feels the walls shrinking up on him.
So when you go start blaming stuff on everybody else, man, when this goes to court, people gonna say, oh, he's trying to blame it on everybody else and lie. He don't give a damn. He doesn't care. You just admitted it, bro. Just tell us what happened.
I didn't kill nobody.
I know you didn't mean to, but this is the deal.
Zach, he came for me.
Okay.
He came for me.
What happened?
It's the same story, just without my friend. When I came to the store and asked for a ride back to my house, I thought he was cool. He bought me a drink and everything. When we was pulling into the driveway, he was like, no, you're coming with me. And that's when we got into the scuffle and I shot him twice.
I feel bad that he put himself in this situation. I knew that, golly, this kid's jacked his life up, but Jeremiah, our victim, wasn't coming back. I think he's seeing the writing on the wall like, crap, I'm in a situation I don't want to be in.
Where'd you get your gun, Zach? I mean, you had it. You just got it in the mix.
I found it one day going through the bandit house.
I asked him about why he had a gun, and he said for safety. A kid his age, if you got to carry a gun, then you go into places that you shouldn't be.
Be honest with me, were you under the influence of drugs yesterday? Because you were stumbling around.
I was barred out. Having addiction to bars.
He'd been taking Xanax, and Xanax makes people lethargic. Maybe it gave him more courage to do the act that he did.
So I really wasn't trying to hurt him. I was just trying to get away. That was self-defense. He really came at me. He told me that I was coming with him. That's when he grabbed me.
Zach, you want my honest opinion? You met this guy.
Yes, sir.
He bought you a drink, and you probably saw a little bit of money in his hand. You probably did legitimately ask him for a ride.
I did.
And once you got close to your house, you told him to give you your money. You ended up shooting him, and y'all crashed. And you ran directly home.
Do I really seem like someone that would kill someone just for...
No.
We're trying to understand, bro.
No, you don't look like a killer. But you're not taking responsibility for what happened.
It just went bad, didn't it, Zach?
Oh, I'm sorry.
he's feeling sorry for himself that he got caught. You know, at some point he may feel sorry for what he did.
He's a 16-year-old kid, so I do feel sad in that sense for him.
You stand up, turn around, face the other way.
But I don't ever lose focus of Jeremiah's never come back because of what this young man did.
Just 24 hours after the murder of Jeremiah Goldman, Zachariah Stevenson is charged with first-degree murder and robbery with a dangerous weapon.
Detective Gatwood called stating that we got him and he's under arrest. And it was, wow, I mean, just so unbelievable. My son, he was so kind-hearted, would give you the shirt off his back. So it doesn't surprise me that he would buy somebody a drink and give him a ride.
It was pretty good video.
The team gets security footage from the convenience store where Zach says he met Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, he's pulling up in his white car. Zach starts talking to Jeremiah outside the store. Jeremiah buys him a drink. Probably saw Jeremiah with a pocket full of money. At that point, was formulating in his mind, this is going to be an easy robbery. Looked like a very friendly encounter. They get in their car. There wasn't anything that indicated that Zach was being kidnapped. Within 2-3 minutes of leaving there, he's murdered. You got a confession, you got physical evidence, you got video, you got witnesses. This is a case that any district attorney wants.
My name is John Jersma. I'm an assistant district attorney in Tulsa County, and I was the lead counsel on the case. We worry about what the jurors will believe to be true. The defense will try to show that there was some evidence of self-defense, being able to spread doubt. Who knows what could have happened in that car? As the state of Oklahoma, we've got to prove his guilt. If there are any untold questions, the defense tends to argue in these cases that that's reasonable doubt.
My name is Kevin Keller. In this case, I was the second chair prosecutor. We have to prove robbery is a motive. What happened in that car was not self-defense and was murder.
That's not the prosecution's only challenge.
We had a defendant who was very young and who looked even younger.
In Oklahoma, if someone commits murder in the first degree, whether they're 35 or 13, they're charged as an adult. He was 16 at the time that we charged him. He was to stand trial as an adult. That was certainly something that we'd have to overcome.
From the jury's perspective, they might look at Zachariah as a child who has absolutely no capacity to prey upon anyone.
The trial for the murder of Jeremiah Goldman begins.
There was definitely some tension in the courtroom. Coming from the defendant's family, they didn't think that he did anything wrong. But the courtroom is full of people from both sides.
It was important for me to be there because I had to know what happened to Jeremiah.
In opening arguments, the defense focused more on the fact that they didn't believe the evidence was going to show this was a murder in the first degree, that he didn't intend to kill Jeremiah. They were non-committal on what actually happened. They wanted to allow the evidence to be able to create doubt.
At first, we did find it interesting that the defense did not offer their side of the story, but they reminded us that the prosecution has to prove guilt. My name is Celeste Howard, and I was the foreperson for the Zachariah Stevenson trial. The defense portrayed Zachariah as a good kid that just got in a bad situation and made a bad decision.
So I really wasn't trying to hurt him. I was just trying to get away.
The defense made it a point to emphasize the fact that Jeremiah did have methamphetamines in his system because it's a stimulant, that he was acting aggressively.
When the defense brought up the victim's drug use, I think it raised a lot of questions.
Without saying outright this was self-defense, they tried to push the jury in that direction.
Day 3 of the trial. The state calls on the medical examiner to disprove that Zach was defending himself.
Jeremiah was shot on the right side of his arm and almost went into his armpit. Most likely, he was holding his arm like he was driving a car. And so that's not evidence that Jeremiah was attacking him. There were also 2 shots on the back part of Jeremiah, one that was directly in his back. And so it's very unlikely that it was actually self-defense.
One of the bullets from the back side went into his lungs. And there was no coming back from those wounds. Horrifying, the autopsy pictures. And you're not allowed to show any emotion in the courtroom. How do you not show emotion? I wasn't going to be able to hold it together at that point.
The 5 gunshot wounds showed us the excessiveness of how Jeremiah was shot. That just didn't show us self-defense.
So 2:30 is the time when Jeremiah gets the $160. Jeremiah arrives at the Admiral Food Mart about 2:34.
Agrees to buy him juice.
Yes.
Then they head eastbound in the direction of the defendant's house.
Right.
And he's dying at 2:37. So what kind of kidnapping is this? If Jeremiah was taking Zachariah in the direction of his house, I don't think there was a whiff of self-defense to this.
No.
We really laid out a clear picture. Anytime somebody unloads a firearm on someone else and empties out the gun, the intent of that person becomes really clear. This is first-degree murder.
To clinch their case, the state calls their last witness.
I gave the jurors evidence and testimony why I believe this was a robbery in the case of Jeremiah that led to his murder.
We talked about Zachariah having in his pocket a fully loaded handgun, him needing Jeremiah to buy him stuff, and so he didn't have his own money. Jeremiah was missing cash. All those things pointed to a robbery.
Just as the prosecution has established its theory for a motive, it's the defense's turn.
In the cross-examined Detective Gatwood, the robbery motive did come into question.
There was some money that was found at the ME's office later. The victim did have some cash on his person, down in his pocket.
The defense pushed the fact that there was still about $120 out of that $160 that Jeremiah had when they found him. Why hadn't it been stolen? The jurors are left to speculate.
Was there proof that there was a robbery without a doubt? Or is there proof that something else could have happened?
Was it a misunderstanding? Was it 2 people under the influence of drugs?
And then something went wrong that caused and required Zachariah to use lethal force in a legal manner.
Was Jeremiah pulling into that apartment looking for something, someone, and Zachariah panicked?
We didn't know exactly what went down for 90 seconds in that car. The jury are liable to believe that Jeremiah was kidnapping Zachariah. Was this really completely a robbery from start to finish and a robbery that went wrong? Or was this something else but still criminal and still murder?
4 days into Zachariah Stevenson's trial.
So after both sides rest, there's what's called an instruction conference, where the judge and the 2 sets of attorneys get together about what instructions the jury should receive.
We will propose individual instructions and the judge will ultimately make her decision. And so this was a little bit of a contentious jury instruction conference because there were certain things that we couldn't agree on. The defense asked for a self-defense instruction. There wasn't any evidence to show self-defense, and so the judge denied that instruction.
That was the only saving defense for the defense to give to the jury. We might have this in the bag.
But then the defense regroups with a surprise strategy.
Their pivot was to voluntary intoxication. When someone is so intoxicated that they can't think clearly to form intent.
So intoxicated that he could not form the mental state to commit premeditated murder, then it gets knocked down to second-degree murder.
The defense close was a pitch for sympathy because there was evidence that the defendant had taken some Xanax bars. He didn't know what he was doing.
He basically gave the defense, he could have misinterpreted what happened, and that's why he killed Jeremiah, so give him a lesser sentence. It was a smart move for the defense attorneys. But voluntary intoxication, that does not apply in this case. He seems like he's high, but not so high that he can't comprehend.
The way that he was acting was deliberate, and he was making goal-oriented actions.
The defendant had the wherewithal to know what he was doing, reloading his gun, picking up shell casings, putting them in his pocket.
Now, the jury deliberates.
You've done your job, and you can't do anything else, and it's up to the jury to decide, and it's completely out of your control.
When the jury was deliberating, we stayed in the courthouse. I was so nervous.
This trial was one of the most difficult situations and decisions of my life. Knowing that the defendant was a 16-year-old minor and the victim lost his life. Initially, the jurors did not agree on whether Zachariah was intoxicated. We requested to watch the videos. We watched Zachariah stumble, and with that, we came to the agreement that Zachariah was indeed intoxicated. Understanding two individuals on two different levels of high, something could have gone wrong in that car based on a misunderstanding or confusion.
The verdict is one decision. There's also the sentencing.
We had to look at the jurors and ask them to make a very tough call and send a 16-year-old to prison for life.
Some jurors wanted life, some wanted 10. It was extremely challenging. We wanted the defendant to pay for his crime, but we also wanted to give him the opportunity for rehabilitation.
After 5 hours of deliberation,
the jury came back and they found the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree, not guilty of murder in the first degree. They found him not guilty of robbery with a firearm, and they found him guilty of carrying a weapon unlawfully. And they gave him 18 years for murder in the second degree.
I believe in this case, the jury used the voluntary intoxication instruction to reach a compromise verdict.
If you are not of sound mind, voluntary intoxication, you cannot convict of first-degree murder.
At the end of the day, this defendant was going to have the label as a murderer for the rest of his life for murdering Jeremiah Goldman.
Zachariah broke out in tears. The family members of both the defendant as well as the victim were very emotional as well.
I didn't feel that I wanted him to spend his life in prison, but I feel like 18 years isn't long enough.
We think that we have the verdict that's going to close this case out. We were a little bit wrong.
Zachariah's defense delivers another surprise, this time for his upcoming sentencing hearing.
The defense filed a motion asking for the defendant to not go to adult prison, but to be treated as a youthful offender.
They tried to argue that he should go into the juvenile system and receive treatment and rehabilitation instead of serving his time in prison.
I think we treat it like a normal sentencing. He was charged with murder in the first degree. It's not authorized by the law.
There aren't a whole lot of cases that are actually written about this because this is a rare issue that doesn't frequently come up. And so what we had was the statute, and really all it came down to was arguing the law to the judge and explaining exactly what the statute required.
Zachariah will be sentenced at a hearing 3 months after his trial.
This is far, far too late, and it would be improper to even consider doing a reversal at this stage of the proceeding.
To go through the entire trial process and then go and try to have him sent back to juvenile, honestly, they were trying to throw everything at the wall in this case.
I would say our chances at sentencing, I'm not sure. I would say it's anyone's guess.
It's constantly on my mind. And I'm constantly going back through my phone and looking at pictures.
We're going for the sentencing for Zachariah Stevenson.
Jeremiah's mother and sister prepare for what they hope to be their last day in court.
I think I'm going to have to read my mom's victim's impact statements. Jeremiah was the sweetest, most kind-hearted soul you could ever meet. Most every night he would call or text saying goodnight. It pains me every day that I have to drive by the place Jeremiah was shot and killed on my way home from work. Picturing my son running in pain, but my son collapsed and died before help arrived.
It was important for me to be going to the sentencing, to hear and see all of it.
I'm a little anxious, but ready for it to be over. I'm just ready, tired of going to court hearings. I hope we get justice, and I hope he gets the sentence that we already feel he's getting, the 18 years.
They're gonna come up with some sort of imaginative argument after that, and our goal is to really recenter her with the law.
Even if the judge agreed with their legal argument, the law was on our side.
I think me and John both feel a heavy responsibility today. Can't lie, I'm a little nervous. There's a lot on the line.
When we showed up for the sentencing hearing, we knew what the stakes were.
Will Zachariah then be sentenced under the Youthful Offender Act? The sentencing hearing really became the main event. The state presented victim impact statements.
I couldn't read my impact statement in court. My daughter had to read mine and hers. I'll never get to hear him say, "I love you, Mama." I don't think I will ever forget what his voice sounded like. I know I won't. I hear it right now.
Judge Holmes sentenced the defendant to adult prison and thereby overruled their motion for youthful offender certification.
Today, Judge Holmes sentenced him to 18 years, murder in the second degree. He'll be required to serve at least 85% of that. That puts him somewhere in his early to mid-30s before he's able to get out. The justice system played out how it should. That's all we can ask for.
Thank you.
You bet. We'll see you, buddy.
All right, we're done.
I was a little bit nervous, but Judge Holmes honored what the jurors came up with, 18 years, and that's good.
No, you guys done an amazing job. I've always told all my family members and friends, like, I think you guys have done really good. So.
I hope Jeremiah's family has closure. They've still got to live without their son or brother, friends for the rest of their lives. And that's always the hardest thing in these cases.
I thought that after the sentencing and he's gone to prison, I thought that we could finally move on, but I don't know if I would ever be able to.
Jeremiah's friends and family gather to remember him.
I just told him that I love him and I miss him a lot. Bunches of love forever and always. Love your mama. For the balloon release, we're getting Pittsburgh Steelers, yellow and black colors for the balloons. That was his favorite.
Hey, everybody. I just want to thank you guys all for coming.
I think my grandson, he's 4 years old. He still thinks Jeremiah might be coming back. I often wonder about that. One time, I told him I missed Jeremiah, and he said, well, he'll be back. He'll be back.
Texas, 1991. The town had almost forgotten the name of the woman who vanished on a warm October night, until 35 years later, a police cruiser stopped outside a quiet house before sunrise, and a man who had spent decades believing the past was buried finally heard the words he had feared all along. You are under arrest. At 11:47 p.m. on October 18th, Sill, 1991, 24-year-old Laura Bennett left the Lone Star Diner on the east side of Bell County, Texas. She had worked the late shift. She had laughed with a waitress. She had counted her tip. She had complained about the cold coffee. Nothing about that night seemed dangerous. Nothing suggested that she was minutes away from becoming the center of one of the county's most haunting mysteries. Her blue Ford Escort was found the next morning less than 2 miles from the diner. The driver's door was locked. The keys were gone. Laura was gone. There was no blood on the seats, no broken glass, no obvious sign of a struggle. Her purse sat on the passenger floor. Her wallet was inside. Her identification was untouched. A half-finished bottle of soda remained in the cup holder, condensation still visible beneath it when officers first arrived. And on the windshield was something that investigators would not understand for years, a single muddy fingerprint. At first, police believed Laura might have left willingly. That theory lasted less than 12 hours. Her family knew she would never disappear without calling. Her mother had spoken to her every evening. Her younger brother had been waiting for her to come home that night because they were supposed to go fishing the next morning. Laura had promised. She never came. By sunrise, volunteers were walking the roadside with flashlights. Deputies searched drainage ditches. Dogs moved through fields behind the diner. Laura's photograph appeared on local television. Her name was printed in newspapers across central Texas. Missing woman, 24 years old, 5'4", brown hair, green eyes. Last seen wearing a dark denim jacket. The town watched. The town waited. And then the first strange detail emerged. A truck driver told police he had seen Laura's blue Escort parked near an abandoned service road shortly after midnight. He remembered the vehicle because someone had been standing beside it. A man, tall, wearing a light-colored jacket. The truck driver said the man appeared to be arguing with someone, but he could not see the other person. He assumed it was a couple having a disagreement. He kept driving. That decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. Investigators searched the service road. They found tire impressions in the mud. One set belonged to Laura's Ford. The other appeared to belong to an older pickup truck. There was also a footprint. Size 11. Deep heel. Distinctive diagonal pattern across the sole. A plaster cast was made. It became evidence number 14. Then the trail stopped. No body. No weapon. No confession. No witness who could identify the man beside the car. For weeks, detectives worked around the clock. They interviewed Laura's co-workers. They checked former boyfriends. They searched financial records. They examined telephone calls. They questioned truck drivers, mechanics, construction workers, night shift employees, and anyone who had been near the diner that evening. One name kept appearing. Daniel Mercer, 32 years old, mechanic, married, no criminal record. He lived approximately 3 miles from the abandoned service road. Mercer admitted knowing Laura. He had serviced her car twice. He told detectives they had spoken at the diner several times, but he denied seeing her that night. He said he had been home watching television. His wife confirmed the story. For investigators, that was enough to make him interesting, but not enough to arrest him. There was no physical evidence connecting Mercer to Laureus' disappearance. No witness placed him inside her car. No blood. No fingerprints. No confession. Only a strange coincidence. His pickup was the same general type seen near the service road. That meant almost nothing. Texas was full of old pickup. The investigation began to slow. Then winter came. Laureus' family refused to accept the possibility that she was dead. They kept her bedroom exactly as she had left it. Her Christmas presents remained unopened. Her mother continued checking the telephone whenever it rang. Every unfamiliar number created the same terrible hope. Every silence crushed it. In January 1992, police received a letter. No return address. 3 sentences. I know where she is. You are looking in the wrong place. Stop asking questions. The letter was unsigned. Investigators examined the paper. They searched for fingerprints. They compared handwriting samples from suspects. Nothing. The envelope contained no usable evidence. But the message changed the case. Someone knew something. Someone was watching. For the first time, detectives considered the possibility that Laureus' disappearance was not random. The letter suggested knowledge. Knowledge meant proximity. And proximity meant someone in the community might have known more than they were saying. Detectives went back through every interview. They discovered a detail they had initially overlooked. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on the night Laura disappeared, a diner waitress remembered seeing Laura speaking with a man near the rear entrance. The waitress had assumed he was a customer. She described him as tall, dark hair, light jacket. She remembered one unusual thing. He was wearing a silver watch. Mercer owned a silver watch. That was the moment investigators began looking at him differently. But Mercer had an alibi. His wife said he came home before midnight. A neighbor remembered seeing his truck in the driveway. No one could prove he had left, but no one could prove he had. The case went to a grand jury. Nothing happened. The evidence was too weak. The investigation remained open. Then, in 1993, the file disappeared into a cabinet. Not officially, not completely, but practically. Laura Bennett became another name in a growing list of missing persons whose cases slowly faded beneath newer crime. Years passed. The diner closed. The abandoned service road was paved. The fields were developed. The truck driver moved to another state. Laura's mother grew older. Her brother stopped talking about fishing, and Daniel Mercer remained in Bell County. He married again. He changed jobs. He bought a larger house. He attended church. He coached youth baseball. People knew him as quiet, reliable, ordinary. That word would later become one of the most disturbing parts of the case. Ordinary. Because 30 years after Laura disappeared, detectives would discover that the most important evidence had been sitting inside an evidence room all along. In 2021, Bell County created a cold case unit. The old files were digitized. Boxes were opened. Photographs were scanned. Fingerprints were entered into newer databases. The team returned to Laura Bennett's case because one detective noticed something almost invisible in a photograph taken in 1991. The muddy fingerprint on Laura's windshield had never been fully analyzed. Technology had changed. Fingerprint databases had changed. And suddenly, evidence that had once been considered useless became valuable. The print was enhanced, mapped, compared, and investigators got a result. It was not a perfect identification, but it was close, very close. The fingerprint belonged to a man who had worked at the same mechanic's garage as Daniel Mercer in 1991. His name was Thomas Reed. Reed was 67 by then. He lived in Oklahoma. He had no connection to Laura after 1991. When detectives interviewed him, he remembered the case immediately, but he denied touching Laura's car. He said he had never even met her. The investigators checked his old employment records. He had. His name appeared on a service invoice for Laura S. Ford, escort, 3 months before her disappearance. That changed everything. The fingerprint was not enough to prove murder, but it established a connection. Investigators went back to Mercer. His story had changed. Not dramatically, just enough. In 1991, he had said he never saw Laura that night. In 2022, he admitted he had spoken to her at the diner. He said he had forgotten. Detectives asked why. He said it had been 30 years, but detectives knew something Mercer did not. The original waitress had died years earlier. Her statement was still in the file. She had written that Mercer was the man speaking to Laura near the rear entrance. Mercer had denied it for 30 years. Now the lie had a timestamp, and the case began moving again. Search warrants were obtained. Investigators searched Mercer's former property. Nothing. Then they searched an old storage unit. Nothing. Then, beneath a stack of rusted tools, they found a photograph. Laura Bennett. Not a newspaper photograph. Not a missing person poster. A personal photograph. She was sitting in her car, smiling. The picture had been taken from outside the vehicle. On the back was a date. October 18th. Sill 1991. The night she disappeared. Mercer finally stopped talking. The photograph was enough to obtain another warrant. Detectives returned to his house. This time, they searched the garage. Behind a wall panel, they found an old metal toolbox. Inside was a silver wristwatch, a watch Mercer had told police in 1991 he had never owned. The watch was stopped at 12:18, the same approximate time Laura's car was believed to have left the diner. Forensic testing revealed nothing conclusive, but the timeline was devastating. Then came the breakthrough. A retired detective remembered something. During the original investigation, Mercer had voluntarily shown police his truck. The detectives had photographed the truck. One photograph showed the passenger side floorboard. There was mud, fresh mud. At the time, nobody thought much of it. Now investigators enhanced the image. A small fragment was visible near the floor mat, a distinctive red clay. The same unusual clay found along the abandoned service road. The same road where Laura's car had been discovered. It was not enough to prove what happened, but the old case was no longer cold. It was moving. And somewhere beneath decades of lies, Laura Bennett's final night was beginning to take shape. Mercer was placed under surveillance. For weeks, he appeared unaware. Then, one afternoon, detectives watched him drive to an old property outside town. He walked into the woods. He carried a shovel. He stayed for 40 minutes. When he left, investigators searched the area. They found nothing, but the ground had recently been disturbed. Forensic teams returned. They dug. They found fragments of old clothing, a rusted belt buckle, and beneath the roots of a cedar tree, a small metal pendant. Laura's family recognized it immediately. Her mother had given it to her for her 21st birthday. The case had finally crossed the line between disappearance and murder. But one question remained. Where was Laura? The excavation continued through the night. Floodlights illuminated the tree. Detectives worked in silence. At 3:18 a.m., someone called out. A bone fragment had been discovered. Then another. The search area expanded. By dawn, investigators had recovered enough remains to begin identification. 35 years after Laura Bennett vanished, the earth finally gave up what it had been hiding. The remains were confirmed through DNA testing. Laura had been there all along, less than 10 miles from the place where she was last seen. The community that had spent decades asking whether she had run away finally had an answer. She had not. She had been killed, and the man police believed responsible had been living freely among them for more than 3 decades. Mercer was arrested before sunrise. He was 71 years old. The same quiet man neighbors remember. The same man who had once told detectives he had never seen Laura that night. The same man whose name had survived inside the original case file. When officers placed handcuffs around his wrists, Mercer reportedly said only one sentence. "You finally found her." The word spread through Bell County before noon. A cold case solved. A suspect finally arrested. A family finally given an answer. But an answer could not erase 35 years. Lore's mother had died without knowing where her daughter was. Her brother had spent decades wondering whether he should have driven to the diner that night. The waitress who remembered Mercer had never lived long enough to see the arrest. The truck driver who saw the mysterious man beside Laura's car had spent years wondering whether he could have saved her. And the town had to confront a darker truth. The man they had feared for years had not been hiding in another state. He had been there, working, shopping, driving, smiling, living. While Laura remained beneath the truth, the arrest did not end the questions. It created more. Why had Mercer chosen Laura? Why had he kept the photograph? Why had he returned to the burial site decades later? And why had someone sent the anonymous letter in 1992? Investigators reopened that question too. The handwriting was compared again. This time, technology produced a possible match. The letter had apparently been written by someone connected to Mercer, someone who knew what happened, someone who had remained silent for 35 years. That discovery meant the case was larger than one man. There had been secrets. There had been fear. There had been people who knew something. And there had been a woman whose final hours had been buried beneath silence. Laura Bennett disappeared in 1991, but she never truly left Bell County. Her name remained on an old missing person poster. Her photograph remained in a police file. Her bedroom remained in her mother's house. Her family kept asking the same question. What happened to Laura? For decades, there was no answer. Then the fingerprint surfaced. The photograph resurfaced. The pendant surfaced. The earth opened. And the man who had spent 35 years believing time was on his side discovered the one thing every cold case investigator knows. Time does not erase evidence. It only hides it. Sometimes in an evidence box. Sometimes inside an old photograph. Sometimes beneath the roots of a tree. And sometimes inside the memory of a witness who has carried one terrible image for an entire lifetime. On the night Laura vanished, someone watched her leave the diner. Someone followed her. Someone knew where she was going. And someone knew she would never make it home. For 35 years, the town lived with the uncertainty. Now the uncertainty was gone, but the silence remained. Because even after an arrest, even after an identification, even after a family finally received the truth, there was one thing nobody could give Laura Bennett back. The years, the birthdays, the ordinary mornings, the phone calls she never made, the fishing trip she promised her brother, the future that disappeared with her. That is the cruelest part of a cold case. The arrest may come decades later. The evidence may finally speak. The suspect may finally face a courtroom, but the victim remains forever trapped in the moment when everything stopped. For Laura, that moment was October 18th, Sill, 1991. A diner. A blue Ford Escort. A dark road. A stranger standing beside the car. And a town that went to sleep believing the night was ordinary. It wasn't. 35 years later, Texas finally had its answer. The cold case was solved. The suspect was finally arrested. But for everyone who remembered Laura, the question was never only who killed her. It was how many years a family could live with silence before silence became its own kind of prison. And in Bell County, that question still hangs over the old service road. Because some places remember, some evidence waits, and some names refuse to disappear. The arrest should have been the end of the story. Instead, it opened a door investigators had been trying to force open for 35 years. At 6:42 on the morning after Daniel Mercer was taken into custody, detectives returned to the evidence warehouse where Laura Bennett's original case file had been stored. The building was almost empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Metal shelves stretched across the room, packed with boxes from crimes that had happened before most of the detectives working the case were even born. Laura's file sat on the third shelf. Brown cardboard. Faded ink. A number written by hand. 1991. For decades, that box had represented failure. Now it contained the beginning of an answer. Detective Aaron Cole placed the original photographs across a table. He had spent 18 months rebuilding the investigation from the ground up. Every statement, every receipt, every telephone record, every photograph, every name. He was looking for one thing, something investigators had missed, something that could explain why Laura disappeared, why Mercer lied, and why the anonymous letter had appeared only weeks later. The photograph of Laura S. Ford, escort, was placed beneath a magnifying lamp. Cole studied it again. The muddy fingerprint was visible on the lower corner of the windshield. But this time, he noticed something else, a reflection, barely visible in the glass. The original investigators had photographed the vehicle from the front. In the windshield reflection, there appeared to be another vehicle behind them, an older pickup, dark-colored. Its passenger door was open. Cole enlarged the image. The reflection became grainy. He enlarged it again. A shape appeared beside the truck. A person. Not Laura. Not Mercer. Someone else. For the first time, investigators had visual evidence suggesting that another person may have been present at the scene. The discovery immediately changed the direction of the investigation. Mercer might not have acted alone, or someone may have arrived after Laura disappeared. Either possibility was dangerous. The detectives began reconstructing every minute between 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. At 11:31, Laura left the diner. At 11:34, a waitress saw her speaking with a man. At 11:41, Laura's car left the parking lot. At approximately 11:56, the truck driver saw the blue Escort near the service road. At 12:18, the silver watch recovered from Mercer's property had stopped, and at 12:26, another witness reported hearing what sounded like a vehicle accelerating from the direction of the field. 8 minutes. That was all. 8 minutes in which something happened that changed Laura's life forever. The investigators went back to the truck driver. He was now 79 years old. His memory was imperfect. But when Cole showed him the enlarged photograph, the old man stared at the image for nearly a minute. Then he pointed at the dark pickup. That truck, he said. He remembered it. Not the license plate. Not the driver. The truck itself. It had a distinctive white stripe along the side. Cole checked the old registration records. Only 23 vehicles matching the description had been registered in Bell County in 1991. They narrowed the list. 7. Then 3. Then 1. The truck had belonged to a man named Richard Hale. Hale had been 39 years old in 1991. He worked as a security supervisor at a manufacturing plant outside town. He had also been interviewed during the original investigation. Once. Only once. His statement was 3 paragraphs long. He claimed he had been working overnight. The factory manager had confirmed that he was scheduled to work. Investigators had never checked whether he actually showed up. Now they did. The factory no longer existed. The records were stored in a regional archive. Payroll documents showed Hale had clocked in at 9:02 p.m., but there was a problem. The facility had no electronic access system in 1991. Employees signed in manually. The signature beside Hale's name looked different from the handwriting in his other records. That discovery led detectives to another witness, a former security guard. His name was Samuel Ortiz. Ortiz remembered Hale. He remembered something else, too. On October 18, 1991, Hale disappeared from the factory for nearly an hour. He had told Ortiz he needed to check a problem at a remote storage building. He left around 11:20. He returned shortly after midnight. Ortiz had forgotten about it until detectives showed him the date. Then the memory came back. Hale had returned covered in mud. Not much, just enough to notice. Ortiz had asked what happened. Hale laughed and said he had slipped near the storage building. The storage building was nowhere near the field. It was on the opposite side of the property. The mud should have been different. Investigators collected soil samples from the old location. The building had been demolished years earlier, but the surrounding ground still contained the same reddish clay found near Laura's burial site. Now there were 2 men, Mercer, Hale, 2 stories, 2 unexplained connections, and 1 dead woman. Detectives brought Hale in for questioning. He was 74 years old. He walked slowly into the interview room. He sat down. He looked at the photographs. Then he looked at the detectives. "I knew this day would come," he said. The room went silent. Cole leaned forward. What day? Hale stared at the table. The day someone finally asked the right questions. He admitted knowing Mercer. He admitted seeing Laura that night. But he denied killing her. He said Mercer had called him after midnight. He said Mercer sounded frightened. According to Hale, Mercer told him there had been an accident. Laura was unconscious. Hale claimed he drove to the service road. He said he saw Laura lying beside the car. He said Mercer told him she was already dead, but there was a contradiction. Hale said he arrived after midnight. The truck driver's photograph suggested his truck was already at the scene before then. Cole placed the photograph in front of him. Hale stared at it. His face changed. For the first time, the confidence disappeared. That photograph wasn't supposed to exist, he whispered. That sentence became one of the most important moments in the investigation, because Hale had just revealed something investigators had not told him. They had never publicly disclosed the photograph. They had never mentioned the reflection. They had never told him about the truck. He knew. He had seen it. And that meant he had been there. Hale eventually admitted that he had followed Laura from the diner. He claimed Mercer had asked him to do it. He said Mercer had become obsessed with Laura after she rejected him. Mercer wanted to scare her. Nothing more. At least, that was the story Hale told investigators. But then came the part that changed everything. Hale said Mercer confronted Laura beside the road. They argued. Laura tried to leave. Mercer grabbed the driver's door. Laura fought back. Hale said he watched. He did nothing. Then Laura fell. The room became silent. Cole asked whether she was alive. Hale looked away. Yes, he said. That single word changed the case. Laura had been alive after the confrontation. She had been alive when the men stood beside her car. She had been alive when the decision was made to help her. And they did not. Hale claimed Mercer panicked. He said Mercer told him they could not let Laura identify that. Then Hale stopped talking. Investigators pressed him. He refused. They showed him the photograph. They showed him the soil evidence. They showed him the old witness statements. Still nothing. Then Cole placed Laura's pendant on the table. Hale stared at it. His eyes filled with tears. I buried her, he said. The words barely came out. I buried her because he told me to. For 35 years, that secret had remained hidden. But now investigators needed to know one thing. Where was the rest of the evidence? Hale described the burial site. He said Mercer had chosen the location. He said they had returned twice. Once to bury Laura. Once several weeks later. The second visit was to move her remains deeper beneath the root. That explained why the original search had failed. The investigators had searched the area in 1991, but they had searched near the road, not the cedar grove. Hale said Mercer believed no one would ever look there. He was wrong. Time had eventually led them back. But there was another mystery. The anonymous letter. Hale denied writing it. Mercer denied writing it. Investigators reopened the envelope evidence. The paper was analyzed using modern forensic technique. The ink was compared with samples from both men. Nothing conclusive. Then investigators found a name. A third person. Evelyn Hale. Richard Hale's wife. She had been 27 in 1991. She had died in 2010. Her belongings had been stored by her daughter. Inside one box was a handwritten journal. Most entries were ordinary. Bills, family arguments, work, Christmas. But one entry was different. October 22nd, Sill 1991. 4 days after Laura disappeared. The entry contained only 2 sentences. Richard came home late again. He says I should never ask about the girl. Detectives read the words again and again. The case was no longer simply about a missing woman and a suspect. It was about a chain of silence. Mercer had lied. Hale had lied. And someone else had known enough to warn police. But the warning had never been enough. The investigators compared Evelyn's handwriting with the anonymous letter. The results were not definitive. But several similarities appeared. The same unusual spacing. The same slant. The same way certain letters were formed. It suggested that Evelyn may have written the letter. If she did, she had been trying to warn police without exposing her husband. She had known something terrible had happened, and she had remained silent. Perhaps out of fear. Perhaps because she did not know the entire truth. Perhaps because she believed Mercer and Hale would discover what she had done. She died carrying that secret. Now detectives had enough evidence to reconstruct the final hour. Laura had not vanished spontaneously. She had been watched, followed, confronted, and then taken away. Her car had been abandoned as a false trail. Her purse had been left behind deliberately. Her keys had been removed. The scene had been manipulated to make investigators believe she had simply disappeared. For years, that deception worked. Then the smallest details began breaking apart. A fingerprint, a photograph, a footprint, a watch, a pendant, a forgotten employee record, a sentence in a dead woman's journal. One by one, the pieces returned. And as they returned, the silence surrounding Laura Bennett finally began to collapse. Mercer was now facing charges. Hale was cooperating. But detectives still had one final problem. The evidence against Mercer was powerful. The evidence against Hale was strong, yet neither man had explained everything. There was still one missing piece. What exactly happened during those 8 minutes beside the abandoned service road? And why had Mercer been so certain that no one would ever find Laura? Because somewhere inside the original case file was one more document. A document investigators had overlooked for decades. A handwritten statement. Never entered into the official timeline, signed by a witness who had disappeared from the investigation almost as quickly as Laura herself. And when detectives finally found that witness, they discovered that the story of October 18th, Sill, 1991, was about to become even darker. The witness had been missing from the case for 35 years, not missing in the way Laura Bennett had been missing. This man had been alive. He had been working. He had been raising children. He had been paying taxes and changing addresses and growing older while the case disappeared into the archive. His name was Michael Torres. In 1991, he was 22 years old and worked nights at a gas station less than a mile from the abandoned service road. His statement had been taken on October 19th. Then it vanished from the active investigation. Not destroyed, not removed, simply forgotten. It was found inside a supplemental evidence folder, tucked behind photographs that had never been digitized. The statement was handwritten. 4 pages. The final line was underlined twice. I saw 2 men with a woman. Detective Aaron Cole read it without speaking. He read it again. Then he called the cold case team into the room. For 35 years, investigators had believed the truck driver was the last known witness. He wasn't. Michael Torres had been closer, much closer, and he had seen something the others had not. At 12:07 a.m. on October 19th, Torres was closing the gas station. He remembered hearing an engine. He looked toward the road. A blue Ford Escort passed slowly. He recognized the car because it had stopped at his station earlier that evening. Then another vehicle followed. An older dark pickup, white stripe, passenger side door damaged. Torres watched both vehicles disappear toward the service road. Minutes later, he saw the pickup return. The Ford did not. And there was someone inside the truck, a woman. Torres could not see her face, but he remembered her hair. Brown. Long. She was sitting in the passenger seat. Torres wrote that detail in his statement. Then he wrote something even more important. The driver looked like the mechanic from the diner, Daniel Mercer. Torres had seen him before. He had bought cigarettes from the gas station several times. Torres knew his face. He had no reason to forget it. But there was another man in the truck, sitting beside him. Richard Hale. Torres did not know his name at the time. He described him as the older man with a scar near his left eyebrow. Investigators checked Hale's photograph. There it was, a faint scar, left eyebrow. The old statement suddenly became a match. Laura had not been alone. Mercer had not been alone. And the truck driver had not been the only witness. The investigators located Michael Torres in New Mexico. He was 57 years old. When Cole called him, Torres immediately recognized Laura's name. I wondered when someone would come looking, he said. He agreed to meet. The interview took place in a small office. Torres brought an old notebook. Inside was a copy of the original statement. He had kept it for 35 years. Cole asked why. Torres looked at him. Because nobody believed me. That sentence stayed in the room. Torres said detectives had questioned him twice. The second time, they told him he must have mistaken the vehicles. They suggested the second man could have been anyone. They told him it was late. Dark. He was tired. He was young. He had probably confused faces. So Torres stopped talking. He signed the statement. He went home. And the investigation moved on. But he never forgot what he saw. He remembered the woman in the passenger seat. He remembered her hands. They were moving. She was alive. That detail destroyed the timeline investigators had assumed for decades. Laura had been alive when the pickup left the area. She had not died beside the road. She had been transported somewhere. And now investigators knew where. Hale's confession had placed the burial site beneath the cedar tree. But Torres had seen the truck heading in another direction first. Detectives returned to the original map. They traced the road. The pickup had traveled west, away from the burial site, toward an abandoned agricultural property. The property belonged to Mercer's uncle in 1991. The uncle had died years later. The land had changed hands. A house had been demolished. A barn remained. Investigators obtained a warrant. The search began at dawn. Cadaver dogs moved through the property. Nothing. Then one dog stopped near the old barn. The ground was disturbed. A forensic team dug. They found an old piece of rope, a metal buckle, and beneath a layer of compacted soil, fragments of blue fabric. The fabric matched the denim jacket Laura had been wearing, but there was something else. A small plastic Cosette case. Empty. The Cosette itself was gone. Investigators searched the property again. They found nothing. Then Hale was confronted with the evidence. He admitted the barn had been used. He said Laura had been taken there after the confrontation. He claimed Mercer was responsible for everything that happened afterward. But Hale's story kept changing. At first, he said Laura was unconscious. Then he said she was conscious. Then he said he never saw her inside the barn. Finally, after nearly 6 hours of questioning, he admitted he had heard her beg. He said she kept asking them to let her go. She told them she would never tell anyone. She promised. Hale said Mercer didn't believe her. The investigators asked what happened next. Hale refused to answer. He looked down. His hands began shaking. Then he whispered a name. Evelyn. His wife. Investigators immediately returned to Evelyn's journal. There were more entries. They had previously read only the October 22nd entry. Now they examined the entire month. October 23rd. I heard something in the barn. October 24th. Richard says it was only an animal. October 26th. I know he is lying. October 31st. He told me not to look. Then November 3rd. I saw blood on his boots. Investigators stopped. That final entry was followed by a blank page. Then nothing for almost 3 weeks. On November 27th, Evelyn wrote, "She is gone. No name. No explanation. Just 3 words. She is gone." The journal transformed the case. Evelyn had known. She may not have known exactly what happened, but she knew Laura had been inside that property. She knew her husband had lied, and she knew something had been hidden. Detectives searched Evelyn's belongings again. They found a photograph. It showed the barn. The picture was taken from inside the house. On the back, Evelyn had written a date, October 19th, Sill, 1991, and beneath it, "God forgive me." The photograph showed nothing obvious, but digital enhancement revealed a figure standing inside the barn doorway, a young woman, barely visible, her face turned away. Laura. The photograph was the first confirmed image of Laura after she left the diner. It also proved that someone else had been watching. Evelyn. She had taken the photograph from a distance. Why? That question became critical. Investigators believed she may have been documenting what she saw because she was afraid. Perhaps she wanted evidence. Perhaps she intended to expose her husband. Perhaps she wanted to save Laura, but she never did. And that decision followed her for the rest of her life. Mercer was confronted with the photograph. He stared at it for almost 30 seconds. Then he pushed it away. He said nothing. Cole asked him if Laura was alive when she entered the barn. Mercer refused to answer. Cole asked if Evelyn had seen her. Silence. Cole asked if Hale had been there. Silence. Then Cole placed the photograph of Laura's Ford Escort on the table. He placed the fingerprint photograph beside it. Then the pendant. Then the journal entry. Mercer looked at all four. Finally, he spoke. "You don't understand what happened that night." Cole leaned forward. "Then tell me." Mercer shook his head. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Those 6 words were the closest thing to an admission he had ever given. But the detectives needed more. They asked who planned it. Mercer said nobody. They asked why Laura was followed. He said he wanted to talk to her. They asked why Hale was there. He said Hale had been driving. They asked why Laura was taken to the barn. Mercer said he couldn't remember. They asked where the Cosette was. Mercer looked up. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. What Cosette? The detectives knew immediately. They had not mentioned a Cosette. The plastic case had never been disclosed publicly. Mercer had just revealed knowledge of evidence he should not have known existed. The interview ended. Investigators obtained another warrant. This time, they searched Mercer's former garage. Behind an old electrical panel, they found a Cosette recorder. The tape was missing, but the recorder still contained a label. Pound. Laura Bennett. The cold case had become something else. A murder investigation with a possible recording of the final hour. The detectives began searching every storage unit connected to Mercer. They checked bank records, property records, old vehicles, former residences, everywhere he had lived. They found nothing. Then a retired auctioneer contacted police. He had purchased several boxes from Mercer's storage unit after Mercer stopped paying the rent. Among those boxes was an old Cosette. The auctioneer had never played it. He still had it. Investigators collected the tape. The label was handwritten. 2 initials. Pound. The recording was sent for forensic audio analysis. The first 30 seconds contained only static. Then came a sound. A car door. Footsteps. A man's voice. And then Laura. Her voice was faint, terrified, but unmistakably alive. She said one sentence. "Please, Daniel, I won't tell anyone." The recording ended. The room where investigators listened to that tape became completely silent. For 35 years, Laura's final moments had been unknown. Now her voice had crossed time. She was no longer a photograph, no longer a name on a post. She was there, speaking, begging, alive. The recording contained another voice, Richard Hale. He said something investigators could barely understand. The audio was clean, enhanced, played again. This time the words became clear. "She knows too much." Then Mercer answered, "We can't take her back." Those words changed the prosecution's case. This was no longer an accident. It was no longer a spontaneous confrontation. There had been a decision, a deliberate decision, and Laura had understood exactly what was happening. The tape ended with a metallic sound, then silence. Investigators listened to it repeatedly. They searched for the rest. The tape had been cut. Someone had removed the final portion. But why? And who had done it? The answer came from an unexpected source. Hale finally confessed that he had destroyed part of the record. He said Mercer had ordered him to do it. He believed the tape contained evidence that could send both men to prison, but Hale claimed he had kept the Cosette recorder. He could not explain why. Perhaps guilt, perhaps fear, perhaps because some part of him knew that one day the truth would return. And it did. 35 years later, the cold case was no longer cold. The timeline was closing. The evidence was converging. And Laura's voice had finally broken through the silence. But investigators still did not know exactly how she died. The burial site had answered where she was found. The tape had answered who controlled her final hour. The witness had answered who transported her. The journal had answered who knew. But the final question remained. What happened inside the barn? That answer would come from the oldest piece of evidence in the entire case, a forensic report written in 1991, a report investigators had dismissed because the evidence was considered inconclusive. 3 decades later, the technology had changed, and the old report was about to reveal something hidden in Laura's clothing, something that could finally connect Daniel Mercer to the moment her life ended. The old forensic report was only 3 pages long. 3 pages. That was all. No dramatic conclusion. No breakthrough. No name. Just measurements, photographs, evidence numbers, and a sentence written near the bottom of the final page. Trace material insufficient for identification. In 1991, that sentence ended the analysis. In 2026, it became the reason detectives reopened the evidence. Laura Bennett's denim jacket had been preserved. The garment had been photographed, packaged, sealed, and stored for decades. The original investigators had collected fibers from the sleeves and collar. At the time, the laboratory had been able to determine only that some fibers were synthetic, nothing more. Now the jacket was examined again. Modern microscopy revealed microscopic fragments embedded deep inside the fabric, industrial insulation, automotive upholstery fibers, and something unusual, a dark green thread, the same type of thread used in work jackets manufactured for the Bell County manufacturing plant where Richard Hale had worked. That did not prove Hale had touched Laura, but it connected the jacket to the location where Hale had claimed he had never taken her. Then the laboratory found something else, a tiny fragment of red paint. The investigators compared it with the old pickup truck. Hale's truck had been repainted in 1994, but beneath the newer paint was the original dark green finish. The fragment from Laura's jacket contained the same unusual chemical composition. The evidence was old, but it was speaking, and it was pointing toward the truck, the same truck seen by Michael Torres, the same truck reflected in Laura's windshield, the same truck Hale had claimed never went near the service road. Detectives confronted him again. This time, they brought the forensic report. They placed the photographs on the table. They placed the old payroll records beside them. Then the journal. Then the Cosette. Then the laboratory results. Hale stared at the evidence. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. Then he closed his eyes. I should have told them in 1991. Cole asked why he didn't. Hale answered quietly. Because I was afraid of Daniel. That answer sounded simple. But the detectives knew fear alone did not explain 35 years of silence. They asked what Mercer had threatened. Hale looked at them. He knew where my wife was. The room changed. Cole asked what he meant. Hale said Mercer had discovered Evelyn had taken the photograph of Laura in the barn. He had found the journal. He knew she had written everything down. Mercer threatened to expose Hale if Hale went to police. But Hale claimed Mercer also threatened Evelyn. He told her husband that if he talked, she would be blamed too. That was why the letter had been anonymous. That was why Evelyn had never gone to police. That was why the truth had remained buried. Fear had become a weapon, and Mercer knew exactly how to use it. But the detectives were not finished. They asked Hale about the final night. This time, he gave them a different account. He said Laura was taken to the barn because Mercer believed she had discovered something. Not an affair. Not money. Something else. Something that could destroy Mercer's life. Laura had apparently seen Mercer near the diner several nights before her disappearance. She had noticed him watching her. She told a co-worker that someone had been following her. At first, nobody took it seriously. She thought it was a stranger. Then she saw Mercer. She confronted him. She asked why he kept appearing wherever she went. Mercer denied following her. But Laura had become suspicious. She told her brother she was considering speaking to police. The information was never recorded in 1991. It came from an old letter found among Laura's belongings. She had written it 2 days before she disappeared. The letter was never mailed. It was addressed to a friend. I think someone is following me. That sentence had been underlined. The friend had kept the letter. She had never connected it to Laura's disappearance. Not until investigators found her in 2024. Suddenly the motive was clearer. Laura had become dangerous to Mercer. She knew he was watching her. She might have known something else. something investigators still could not identify. Hale claimed Mercer believed Laura had evidence, a photograph, a recording, something that could prove he had been following her. That explained the Cosette, but it did not explain what happened inside the barn. Hale finally described it. He said Laura was tied to a chair. She was frightened. Mercer kept asking her where the evidence was. She said she didn't know what he was talking about. Mercer didn't believe her. Hale said Laura looked directly at him. She asked him to help. He did nothing. She asked him again. He still did nothing. Then Mercer left the barn. Hale said he remained behind. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Laura said something that Hale remembered 35 years later. "If you let me go, I won't tell them you were here." Hale said he almost untied her. Almost. Then Mercer returned. The rest of Hale's account became fragmented. He said there was an argument. Laura tried to escape. Mercer grabbed her. She fell. Her head struck the edge of a wooden workbench. She stopped moving. Hale claimed he believed she was dead, but the medical evidence told a more complicated story. Laura had suffered a severe head injury, but that injury alone did not explain her death. The forensic pathologist found evidence of strangulation. The original report had noted bruising around the neck, but the case had never developed enough evidence to identify the assailant. Modern analysis showed that the pattern was consistent with pressure applied after the head injury. Laura had been alive when she was strangled. The truth was devastating. Her death had not been instantaneous. Someone had made a decision and then carried it out. Investigators asked Hale who did it. He said Mercer. He said he watched. He said he was too afraid to intervene. That confession placed Mercer directly at the center of the murder. But the prosecution needed more than Hale's word. They needed evidence connecting Mercer physically to Laura. The jacket provided one connection. The fingerprint provided another. The photograph placed him near her. The recording contained his voice. And then investigators found the missing piece. Inside the old Cosette recorder was a partial fingerprint. Not enough in 1991. Enough now. The print was recovered from beneath the battery compartment. It had been preserved in a location no one had thought to examine. The laboratory processed it. The result came back. Daniel Mercer, the same man who had denied touching Laura's car, the same man who had claimed he had not seen her, the same man who had spent 35 years living under the assumption that the evidence against him had disappeared. Now the evidence was pointing directly at him. The arrest warrant was expanded. Mercer was charged with murder. Hale was charged as an accomplice. The news spread across Texas. For the Bennett family, the announcement was almost impossible to process. Laura's brother James was 60 years old. He had spent most of his adult life wondering whether his sister was alive. He had imagined her living somewhere else. He had imagined finding her. He had imagined receiving a phone call. He had never imagined hearing that she had been found beneath a tree. And he had never imagined that the man responsible had lived within driving distance for decades. When reporters gathered outside the courthouse, James refused to give them a dramatic statement. He held a photograph of Laura. He looked at it for several seconds. Then he said, "She deserved to come home." Nothing more. The case became national news. Cold case solved. 35-year mystery. Retired suspect arrested. Victim finally identified. But behind the headlines was a much darker story, because detectives had discovered that Mercer had almost been caught before, twice. The first time was in 1991. The second time was in 1993. In 1993, a detective had requested a warrant to search Mercer's garage. The request was denied. The judge wanted stronger evidence. The detective wrote a memo explaining that he believed Mercer was involved. The memo was never acted upon. That document was still in the file. 3 decades later, Cole found it. The detective had written, "Subject continues to provide inconsistent statements." Then, "Recommend continued surveillance." And finally, "Concern that evidence may disappear." The surveillance never happened. The case was reassigned. The detective retired. The opportunity disappeared. The discovery devastated the current investigative team. Laura might have been found in 1993. Mercer might have been arrested in 1993. Her family might have received answers decades earlier, but the case slipped through. A combination of weak evidence, limited technology, changing priorities, and human error had allowed the investigation to stall. That failure became part of the story, but another mystery remained. Why had Mercer kept Laura's photograph? Why had he kept the cassette recorder? Why had he returned to the burial site decades later? And why had he never destroyed everything? The detectives believed the answer was psychological. Mercer thought he had controlled the case. He believed he understood what police knew. He believed the evidence was too weak. And perhaps most importantly, he believed time would protect him. He was wrong. Time had preserved the evidence. It had preserved the fingerprint, the jacket, the photograph, the journal, the cassette, the witness statement. Even the mistakes, every forgotten detail had waited. And when investigators finally put them together, the story became impossible to ignore. But there was one final piece. The evidence from Laura's jacket had produced another result. A second fiber. A fiber that did not belong to Mercer. It belonged to someone else. Someone whose name had never appeared in the original investigation. Someone who had been connected to the barn. Someone who had disappeared from Bell County shortly after Laura's disappearance. The investigators traced the name. The person was still alive. And when they found him, he gave them a statement that contradicted almost everything Mercer and Hale had said. He claimed he had entered the barn on the morning of October 19th. He claimed he had seen blood. He claimed the chair was still there. And he claimed something else. Something that meant Laura may not have died where everyone had assumed. The investigation had solved one mystery, but it had just uncovered another. And this time, the answer was buried in a place no one had searched since 1991. The man who entered the barn on the morning of October 19th was named Caleb Foster. In 1991, he was 26 years old. He worked construction. He knew the Mercer family. He knew Richard Hale. And, according to his original employment records, he had been working on a property less than a mile from the barn during the week Laura disappeared. His name appeared nowhere in the original suspect list. Not once. But the fiber recovered from Laura's jacket pointed toward him. Detectives found Foster living in Arizona. He was 71. He agreed to speak. He did not ask for a lawyer. He did not ask why detectives had come. He simply sat down and said, "I wondered how long it would take." Cole asked him what he meant. Foster looked at the photograph of Laura. "I knew you would find her eventually." The sentence immediately raised suspicion. Cole placed the evidence photographs on the table. He asked Foster whether he knew Laura. Foster said no. He had never spoken to her. He had never met her. He had never seen her before October 19th. But then he changed his answer. He said he had seen her. Inside the barn. After midnight. Alive. That word changed everything. Again, Foster claimed he had gone to the property shortly after sunrise because Mercer owed him money. The barn door was unlocked. He entered. The first thing he noticed was the smell of gasoline. The second was blood. There was a wooden chair in the center of the room. The chair was overturned. A piece of rope was hanging from one arm, and on the floor was Laura's denim jacket. Foster said he panicked. He left. He never called police. He never told anyone. Cole asked why. Foster looked at him. "Because I was scared." "Scared of Mercer?" Foster nodded. But then came the detail that made the detectives question everything. Foster said Laura was not there. She was gone. The barn had been cleaned. Someone had removed her. The blood was still there. The chair was still there. But Laura had disappeared. That meant the barn was not necessarily the place where Laura died. It may have been only a temporary location. Investigators returned to the old property. The barn had been standing for decades. The structure was damaged. The roof partially collapsed. Weeds grew through the floorboards. But forensic teams were interested in the foundation. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. The equipment moved slowly across the earth. Then the monitor changed. A rectangular anomaly appeared beneath the barn floor, approximately 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. Too regular to be natural. The team marked the location. Excavation began. The first layer contained nothing. Then old nails. Then broken wood. Then a rusted metal container. Inside was a woman's shoe, brown leather, size 7. Laura's family identified the stock. It was the same pair she had been wearing that night. The second shoe was found 2 feet away. Then came another discovery. A piece of plastic, part of an old driver's license holder. Inside was a fragment of Laura's identification. The investigators stopped digging. The location was now undeniable. Laura had been inside the barn, but the burial site beneath the cedar tree still contained her remains. That meant something had happened between the barn and the final burial location. She had been moved. Why? The answer came from the soil. The original burial site contained traces of wood ash and oil. The same chemical traces appeared beneath the barn. Investigators believed Mercer and Hale had attempted to destroy evidence. They had burned or discarded Laura's belongings. Then they transported her body to the cedar grove. The timeline was becoming clearer. But Foster's statement created another problem. He said Laura was already gone when he arrived. Yet he had seen blood. How much? Foster could not remember. That mattered, because investigators had another witness, a woman named Karen Blake. In 1991, Blake lived across the road from the property. She had told police she heard a vehicle around for aid. Then she heard a woman screaming. The original investigator wrote one sentence in the margin, likely unrelated. The cold case team found the statement in the archive file. They contacted Blake. She was still living in Texas. When shown the map, she immediately remembered. It was the barn, she said. Cole asked what she heard. She described a woman shouting, not screaming continuously. Shouting, arguing. Then one sentence. Please don't. After that, silence. Minutes later, she heard a truck. It drove away. She looked through her window. She saw 2 men. One was Mercer. The other was Hale. The truck was moving toward the cedar grove. The original investigators had dismissed her statement because she could not identify the voice. Now the statement became critical. Laura was alive at the barn. She was still alive after midnight. She was moved before dawn. And 2 men were seen transporting something away. The evidence was no longer circumstantial in isolation. It was cumulative. Every piece strengthened the next. The prosecution began preparing for trial. Mercer's defense attorneys attacked the evidence. They argued the investigation was too old. Witness memories had faded. Physical evidence had been contaminated by decades of storage. The cassette could have been altered. The fingerprint could have been transferred. The fibers could have come from unrelated contact. They said the entire case depended on people remembering events from 35 years earlier, and they were right about one thing. Memory was fragile. But evidence was not only memory. The fingerprint was physical. The DNA was physical. The photograph was physical. The journal was physical. The cassette was physical. Laura's clothing was physical. The burial site was physical. And all of it pointed in the same direction. Then the prosecution received a surprise. Richard Hale wanted to testify. His attorneys objected, but Hale insisted. He wanted to tell the truth, not because he suddenly became brave, not because he expected forgiveness. He said he was dying. He had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. He knew he had little time left, and he did not want to die carrying the secret. The prosecutors met with him. He gave them a recorded statement. It lasted almost 3 hours. For the first time, he described the entire night. He said Mercer had become obsessed with Laura. He had followed her. He had watched her. He had convinced himself she was going to expose him. On the night of October 18th, Mercer called Hale. He told him Laura was leaving the diner. Hale drove to the area. He said he thought Mercer wanted to frighten her. Instead, Mercer intercepted her. They argued. Laura tried to leave. Mercer grabbed her. She fought. Hale watched. Then Laura struck Mercer. He became enraged. She fell. Mercer dragged her into the truck. Hale, said Laura, was conscious. She was crying. She kept asking why they were doing this. Mercer said she knew too much. They drove to the barn. Inside, Mercer searched Laura's purse. He found nothing. He demanded to know where she had hidden the evidence. Laura told him there was no evidence. Mercer didn't believe her. He tied her to the chair. Then he left the room. Hale stayed. That was when Laura spoke to him. She told him she recognized him. She said she had seen his truck near the diner before. Then she said something that haunted him. "You don't have to do this." Hale admitted he almost helped her. He said he walked toward the chair. He reached for the rope. Then Mercer returned. He was carrying a length of wire. Hale said Laura saw it. She began screaming. Mercer attacked her. Hale looked away. He heard the struggle. Then silence. When he looked back, Laura was motionless. Mercer checked her pulse. Then he said, "She can't go home." Hale understood what that meant. They carried her to the truck. They drove to the cedar grove. They buried her before sunrise. Hale, said Mercer, returned to the barn afterward. He wanted to remove anything that could identify them. He burned Laura's jacket, or thought he did, but a fragment survived. The fiber, the paint, the fingerprint. The evidence Mercer thought he had destroyed remained. The confession was devastating. But Hale added one final detail. He said Mercer had not acted alone originally. Someone else had helped him plan the confrontation. Someone who had never been charged. Someone whose identity had been hidden from investigators. Hale named him Caleb Foster, the same man who had claimed he only entered the barn after sunrise, the same man whose fiber was found on Laura's jacket. Foster was not simply a witness. According to Hale, he had supplied the rope, he had helped clean the barn, and he had taken something from Laura's purse, something Mercer desperately wanted, a cassette. The original recording had not been made by Mercer, it had been made by Laura. She had secretly recorded Mercer during an earlier encounter. She had been collecting evidence because she believed he was following her. That cassette contained the conversation that Mercer feared. The missing recording investigators had spent decades searching for was not merely evidence of Laura's death, it was evidence of what Mercer had been doing before she disappeared. Foster had taken it. He had hidden it. And eventually, it had resurfaced. The investigation now had a motive. It had a timeline. It had witnesses. It had physical evidence. And it had a confession. But there was still one problem. Foster denied everything. He denied knowing Mercer. He denied helping him. He denied touching Laura. He denied entering the barn that night. Yet his DNA was found on the rope, and investigators discovered another object inside his old storage records. Laura's missing cassette. The tape was damaged, but it was still there. Forensic specialists restored it. The first voice was Laura, then Mercer, then Foster. 3 voices, 1 conversation. The recording began weeks before the murder. Laura confronted Mercer. She told him she knew he was following her. She told him she had recorded him. Mercer became furious. Foster's voice could be heard in the background. He told Mercer to calm down. Laura asked why Foster was there. Nobody answered. Then Laura said, "If anything happens to me, the police will know." The tape ended there. That sentence became the final piece of the motive. Laura knew. She was afraid. She had tried to protect herself. And instead, her attempt to document the danger became the reason she was targeted. The courtroom would eventually hear that recording. But before trial, investigators made one final discovery. Inside the cassette case was a folded piece of paper, a handwritten note. Laura had written it herself. Only 5 words. "If I disappear, look here." Beneath those words was an address. Not the diner, not the barn, not the cedar grove. A house in Bell County. A house that had belonged to Daniel Mercer. And when investigators searched that property, they found something that had been hidden since 1991. Something Laura had apparently known about. Something that could explain why Mercer had been so desperate to silence her. And when the detectives opened the sealed container beneath the floor, they realized Laura's disappearance had never been only about obsession. It had been about a secret far larger than anyone had imagined. The container beneath Mercer's old house was small enough to fit inside a kitchen cabinet. Rust had eaten through the metal. The lock had almost disappeared. Inside were documents wrapped in plastic, bank statements, photographs. handwritten notes, and one newspaper clipping dated September 1991. The headline concerned an embezzlement investigation at the manufacturing plant where Richard Hale worked. Investigators already knew about the case. What they did not know was that Daniel Mercer had been connected to it. The documents suggested money had been disappearing from company accounts, thousands of dollars. The investigation had never resulted in charges, but Laura Bennett had apparently discovered something. Her name appeared on one of the handwritten pages, only once. Beside it was a sentence. She knows about the transfers. Detective Aaron Cole stared at the page. The motive had just changed. This was not only about obsession, not only about stalking, not only about fear. Laura had apparently stumbled into a financial scheme involving Mercer and Hale. The two men had been moving money through accounts connected to the manufacturing plant. Laura had worked part-time doing bookkeeping for a local business that handled payroll for several companies. She had noticed irregular deposits. At first, she assumed they were accounting errors. Then she noticed the same names appearing repeatedly: Hale, Mercer, and a third name, Caleb Foster. The three men had been connected long before October 1991. They had known each other. They had worked together. And they had apparently believed Laura had discovered their secret. That explained the anonymous letter. It explained the surveillance. It explained the Cosette. It explained why Mercer had been desperate to recover evidence. And it explained why Laura had written those 5 words. If I disappear, look here. She had known something was wrong. She had prepared for the possibility that something might happen to her, but she had not known how quickly the danger would arrive. The investigators examined the financial documents. The numbers were incomplete. Some pages were missing, but enough remained to show a pattern. Payments moved through several accounts, small amounts, never large enough to trigger immediate suspicion. One transfer, then another, then another. Over several months, the total became substantial, more than $100,000. The money had disappeared in 1991. Then the trail stopped. Laura had apparently discovered it shortly before her death. Her notes suggested she was preparing to tell someone, possibly police, possibly her employer, possibly her brother. She never got the chance. The prosecutors now had a stronger motive. Mercer had feared exposure. Hale had feared prison. Foster had feared losing everything. And Laura had become the one person standing between them and silence. But there was another problem. The financial crime had happened 35 years ago. The statute of limitations had expired on some of the offenses. The murder case remained. The financial documents were useful only as evidence of motive. The defense attacked them immediately. They claimed the documents were irrelevant. They argued there was no proof Laura had actually discovered the scheme. But prosecutors had something else. A notebook. Laura's handwriting. The notebook had been found in her childhood bedroom. Her mother had kept it without realizing its significance. The entries were ordinary at first. Work, bill, friends, her brother. Then the tone changed. Something isn't right. Same numbers again. Mercer knows. Need to copy everything. The final entry was dated October 17th, one day before she disappeared. I think they know I know. Below that sentence was a phone number, a detective's office. Laura had apparently intended to call police. The call never happened. The investigators checked telephone records. There was no completed call, but there was an attempted call at 10:54 p.m., less than an hour before Laura left the diner. Someone had tried to reach the detective. That detail became crucial because the detective who would have received the call was still alive. He was 82, retired. When Cole showed him the notebook, he remembered the night. He remembered the telephone ringing. He remembered answering. No one spoke. Then the line went dead. He had assumed it was a wrong number. He never knew it was Laura. For 35 years he had carried no memory of the call. Now he understood. The person on the other end may have been Laura, or someone who had taken her phone. The investigators requested the old telephone records. They found a second call. At 11:03, another unanswered attempt. Then nothing. Laura left the diner at 11:31. By 11:34, she was speaking with Mercer. The timeline was tightening again. Laura had tried to contact police. Someone had intercepted her. She had been followed, and within minutes she disappeared. The case was no longer simply a murder investigation. It was the story of a woman who had realized she was in danger and tried to protect herself. She had documented the threats. She had recorded Mercer. She had hidden notes. She had written instructions. And still, the system failed to protect her. The defense knew this would matter to the juror. They argued the evidence was too old. They questioned the reliability of witnesses. They questioned the chain of custody. They questioned the authenticity of the cassette. But the forensic laboratory had anticipated those attacks. Every item had been re-examined. The cassette was authenticated. The handwriting was confirmed. The DNA matched. The fingerprint matched. The fiber evidence was consistent. The burial site matched. And the witnesses had independent memories that supported the same timeline. Then came the biggest surprise. The prosecution discovered that Mercer had written to Hale from jail. The letter had been intercepted. It contained only a few lines. "I never meant for her to die." The defense tried to suppress it. They argued it was taken out of context, but the prosecution believed it was an admission. Mercer had finally put something in writing. He was not denying Laura's death. He was denying intention. That distinction became the center of the case. Did Mercer intend to kill Laura, or had her death resulted from an uncontrolled confrontation? The medical evidence suggested intent. The strangulation, the restraints, the transportation, the burial, the attempt to destroy evidence. None of those actions looked accidental, but the prosecution still needed to explain the missing hour. What happened between the barn and the burial site? Hale gave them the answer. He said Laura regained consciousness. For a brief moment, she was alive in the truck. She asked where they were taking her. Mercer told her they were going to let her go. She did not believe him. She began crying. Hale, said Laura, looked directly at him. Then she said his name, Richard. That detail devastated Hale because it meant Laura believed he could save her. He could have stopped everything. He did not. Mercer stopped the truck near the cedar grove. They removed Laura. She was still alive. Hale said she was barely conscious. Mercer carried her several feet into the tree. Then he returned to the truck. Hale said he heard a struggle. Then silence. When Mercer returned, Laura was dead. Hale never saw exactly how she died. He said Mercer never told him. But the medical evidence could explain the rest. The strangulation occurred after the head injury. Laura had survived the fall. She had survived the initial assault. And then she was killed. The prosecution had a sequence: confrontation, abduction, barn, assault, transportation, strangulation, burial, cover-up. 35 years of silence. The defense attempted to separate Mercer from the final act. They argued Hale could not see what happened. They argued Foster was unreliable. They argued the physical evidence could not establish who had applied the pressure. Then the prosecution produced the audio. The courtroom heard Laura's voice. The room became completely silent. No music, no narration, no newspaper headline. Just the voice of a woman who had been dead for 35 years. Please, Daniel, I won't tell anyone. The recording lasted only seconds. But those seconds changed the room. Laura was no longer an abstract victim. She was a person, afraid, alive, asking someone she knew to stop. Then the second voice. Mercer, cold, angry. She knows too much. The recording ended. The prosecution played it again. Then the jury heard the forensic analysis. Mercer's voice was consistent with his speech pattern. The tape had not been altered. The recording had not been fabricated. The defense could not explain why Laura's voice and Mercer's voice were together inside a barn on the night she disappeared. Then Foster's voice was analyzed. He was there too. 3 voices. 1 location. 1 night. 1 victim. The case had finally become impossible to dismiss, but the trial had not yet reached its most emotional moment. Laura's brother took the witness stand. He carried a photograph. The same photograph investigators had shown him when they reopened the case. Laura was smiling, young, unaware of what was coming. James told the jury about the last conversation he had with his sister. They had argued. It was something trivial. He wanted to borrow her car. She said no. He laughed. She laughed. He told her he would see her the next morning. He never did. For 35 years he had replayed that conversation. He wondered whether he should have called her later, whether he should have driven to the diner, whether he could have changed something. The prosecutor asked him what he wanted the jury to understand. James looked toward Mercer. He did not shout. He did not cry. He simply said, "She was not a cold case to us." The courtroom went silent. That sentence carried more weight than any forensic report, because while investigators had moved on, Laura's family had not. While files gathered dust, her mother waited. While suspects grew old, her brother kept searching. While the town changed, Laura's name remained. And now, after 35 years, the family was finally hearing her voice again. But the trial was not over. Mercer's defense prepared one final argument. They claimed the investigation had become so desperate for an answer that detectives had connected unrelated pieces of evidence. They argued that Hale was confessing only because he was dying. They argued that Foster was protecting himself. They argued that old evidence could not tell the jury exactly what happened. Then the prosecution revealed one final document, a document signed by Mercer himself, dated October 18th, Sill, 1991. The document had been found inside the metal container beneath his old house. It was not a confession. It was a list. 3 names: Laura Bennett, Richard Hale, Caleb Foster. Beside Laura's name was a single word: problem. Beside Hale, trust. Beside Foster, necessary. The meaning was impossible to prove, but the timing was undeniable. The document had been written before Laura disappeared. It showed Mercer was thinking about the 3 people that night. It showed Laura had become a problem, and it showed Foster had been considered necessary. The defense objected. The judge allowed it. The jury saw it. For the first time, the entire case fit together. The stalking, the financial records, the recording, the barn, the witnesses, the truck, the burial, the hidden evidence, the lie, the decades of silence, and the final arrest. But one question still remained. Why had Mercer kept so much evidence? Why had he not destroyed everything? The answer came from a former detective who had interviewed Mercer in 1991. He remembered something strange. During the original interrogation, Mercer had said, "You people will forget." The detective wrote the sentence in his note. He never understood why Mercer said it. 35 years later, the meaning was obvious. Mercer believed time would erase the truth. He believed witnesses would die. He believed evidence would disappear. He believed investigators would retire. He believed Laura's family would eventually stop asking questions. He believed the case would become another forgotten file. For a long time, he was right. Then technology changed. A fingerprint was re-examined. A fiber was identified. A photograph was enhanced. A journal was found. A cassette was restored. A witness remembered. And the ground gave Laura back. The case that had once seemed impossible suddenly became undeniable. But the final verdict would depend on one thing Mercer had underestimated from the beginning. Not technology. Not forensic science. Not police. Memory. Because somewhere in Texas, people still remembered the night Laura Bennett disappeared. And now, for the first time, their memories were finally being heard. The courtroom was packed on the morning Daniel Mercer's trial began. 35 years had passed since Laura Bennett walked out of the Lone Star Diner. 35 years since her blue Ford Escort was found abandoned. 35 years since her family first heard the words that would define their lives. "She is missing." Now the courtroom doors opened. Mercer entered slowly. 71 years old. Gray hair. Thin shoulders. A face that looked nothing like the photograph from 1991. For a moment he appeared fragile, almost harmless. Then Laura's brother saw him, and the years disappeared. James remembered the man he had once seen around town, the mechanic, the quiet neighbor, the man whose name had appeared in the original investigation, the man who had been questioned and released, the man who had gone home while Laura's family spent another night searching. Mercer sat beside his attorney. He did not look toward the family. He stared straight ahead. The prosecutor stood. The jury entered. And the case that had been buried for 35 years finally entered a courtroom. The opening statement began with one sentence. On October 18th, still 1991, Laura Bennett believed she was going home. The prosecutor paused. She never made it. No dramatic music. No raised voice. Just silence. Then the evidence began. The prosecution showed the jury photographs from the original investigation. Laura at the diner. Her Ford Escort. The abandoned service road. The muddy fingerprint. The tire tracks. The footprint. The evidence looked primitive compared with modern forensic technology, but it had survived. That was the point. The prosecutor explained that the investigation had not failed because there was no evidence. It had failed because the evidence had never been connected. One clue pointed toward Mercer. Another pointed toward Hale. Another pointed toward Foster. Another pointed toward the barn. For decades, they existed as separate pieces. Now they formed a single picture. The first witness was the former truck driver. He was brought into the courtroom in a wheelchair. His hands shook. His eyesight had weakened, but his memory of that night remained clear. He told the jury about the blue Escort, the dark pickup, the man standing beside the vehicle. He described the road, the darkness, the strange feeling that something was wrong. The prosecutor asked him whether he recognized the photograph of Laura's car. He nodded. Then he was shown the photograph of Mercer. The old man stared at it. His lips tightened. "I believe that's him." The defense attacked the identification. 35 years. A dark road. A brief glimpse. The defense attorney asked whether he could swear under oath that Mercer was the man he saw. The witness paused, then answered, "No." The defense smiled, but the prosecution had expected that. They did not need the witness to identify Mercer perfectly. They needed him to establish the vehicle, the truck, the time, the location, the movement. The next witness was Michael Torres, the gas station attendant. He walked into court carrying the old notebook. The pages were yellow. The ink had faded, but his statement was still there. Torres told the jury what he saw: the blue Ford, the dark pickup, the woman inside, the two men. Then he identified the truck. The defense asked him whether he could see the woman's face. No. Could he see the driver's face clearly? Yes. Could he identify him today? Torres looked toward Mercer. Yes. The defense objected. The judge allowed the answer. Torres said, "People change, but some faces stay in your memory." Mercer finally looked at him. Torres did not look away. The courtroom became silent. Then the prosecution showed the jury the old photograph of Laura's windshield, the reflection, the pickup, the open passenger door. The image was grainy, but it was enough to place the truck near Laura's car. Then came the fingerprint. A forensic examiner explained how the print had survived, how it had been lifted from the windshield, how the original technology could not identify it, how modern databases had produced a match. Daniel Mercer. The defense argued contamination. The examiner explained the preservation process. The print had remained sealed. The evidence container was intact. The chain of custody was documented. The defense tried again. Could someone else have touched the windshield? Yes. Could that person have touched it before the disappearance? Possibly. The examiner agreed, but the fingerprint was only one piece. The jury had already heard the timeline. Now they heard the audio. The courtroom lights dimmed. A technician placed the cassette into the playback system. Static filled the room. Then a car door. Footsteps. Breathing. Laura's voice. "Please, Daniel, I won't tell anyone." Her voice was quiet, almost whispering. Then Mercer. "She knows too much." The defense objected. The judge allowed the recording. The tape continued. Foster's voice could be heard. A few words. Then Laura again. "If anything happens to me, the police will know." The tape ended. Nobody moved. Laura's brother lowered his head. The prosecutor did not speak immediately. She allowed the silence to remain. Because there are moments in a courtroom when evidence becomes more powerful than explanation. This was one of them. The forensic audio expert testified that the recording had not been manipulated. The tape was old, damaged, but authentic. The voices were consistent with Mercer and Foster. The defense challenged the quality. The expert explained that imperfections did not make the recording meaningless. Then came the DNA evidence. The rope recovered from the barn contained biological material. The sample was degraded, but a partial profile was obtained. It was consistent with Richard Hale. Another sample came from the jacket. The results connected the garment to the barn. The prosecution showed photographs of the old structure, the chair, the workbench, the floor, the blood traces, the recovered shoe. The audience saw how Laura had been moved. The defense tried to argue that the barn evidence did not prove murder, but then the medical examiner took the stand. She explained Laura's injuries, the head trauma, the bruising, the strangulation, the timing. She told the jury that Laura had survived the initial head injury. That mattered, because the evidence suggested Laura was alive when she was transported, alive when she entered the barn, alive when she begged for help, alive when she was moved again, and alive long enough to understand what was happening. The prosecutor asked one question: was her death accidental? The medical examiner answered, no. The courtroom went still. Could the injuries have occurred without someone intentionally applying force? No. The prosecutor asked, was pressure applied to her neck? Yes. Could that pressure have caused her death? Yes. The defense attorney stood. He asked whether the examiner could identify who had applied the pressure. No. That was the weakness. The physical evidence established murder, but who killed Laura? The prosecution needed to connect Mercer directly to the final act. That connection came from Richard Hale. Hale entered the courtroom under heavy security. He looked older than his 74 years. His face was hollow. His hands trembled. He took the oath. Then he looked toward Laura's family. I am sorry. James did not respond. Hale began speaking. He described the night, the diner, the following, the confrontation, the truck, the barn, the rope, the chair, the argument, the struggle, the burial. He admitted he helped. He admitted he stayed silent. He admitted he lied. Then he described Mercer. He decided she couldn't leave. The prosecutor asked what he meant. Hale looked toward the jury. Daniel killed her. The defense objected. The judge allowed the testimony. Hale continued. He strangled her. Mercer finally reacted. He shook his head. No. It was the first word he had spoken during the trial. Hale heard it. He looked at Mercer. You know it's true. Mercer said nothing. Hale continued. He told me she knew too much. The prosecutor asked, what did she know? Hale hesitated. The money. The financial records were introduced. The transfers. The accounts. The names. The hidden documents. The notebook. Laura's notes. The prosecution explained the motive. Laura had discovered the scheme. She had started documenting it. She had planned to contact police. Mercer believed she would expose them. The murder was not random. It was an attempt to silence her. The defense attacked Hale's credibility. He had confessed. He had lied for decades. He was receiving consideration in exchange for testimony. The defense called him a coward, a liar, a man trying to save himself. Hale did not argue. He accepted the accusations. Then he said, you're right. The courtroom quieted. I lied. He looked at the jury. I lied for 35 years. Then he turned toward Laura's family. But she didn't. That sentence struck harder than anything else, because Laura had spent the last moments of her life trying to tell the truth. Hale had spent 35 years hiding it. Now he was finally speaking. The prosecution presented the journal, Laura's handwriting. I think they know I know. The prosecutor explained when it had been written, one day before the murder. Then she presented the note. If I disappear, look here. The address, Mercer's former house, the hidden container, the financial records, everything Laura had tried to protect, everything she had tried to leave behind. She had known something was coming. She had prepared for the possibility. She had trusted that if she disappeared, someone would eventually look. Someone did. 35 years later, the final witness was James Bennett. He walked slowly to the stand. He looked toward Mercer. The prosecutor asked him about Laura. He spoke for nearly an hour. Not about the murder, about her life, her favorite music, her habit of leaving coffee cups everywhere, her laugh, the way she used to tease him, the fishing trip they never took, the argument they had before she disappeared. He told the jury that Laura was more than a victim. She was a sister, a daughter, a friend, a person with plans, a person who expected to wake up the next morning. Then the prosecutor asked, "What do you want the jury to know?" James looked at the photograph of Laura. He said, "She wasn't asking for much." He paused. "She just wanted to go home." The defense had no questions. James stepped down. Mercer watched him. For the first time, their eyes met. James stared at him. Mercer looked away. The prosecution rested. The defense began presenting its case. They called witnesses who described Mercer as quiet, helpful, reliable. They argued that he had changed with age, that the evidence was old, that Hale was unreliable, that Foster had reasons to lie. They tried to create doubt. And for a few hours it seemed possible, because a cold case is never simple. Every piece of evidence carries uncertainty. Every memory has flaws. Every witness has a history. The defense repeated the same phrase, reasonable doubt. But the prosecution had anticipated it. They had built the case around one principle. No single piece of evidence had to prove everything. The fingerprint alone was not enough. The fiber alone was not enough. The photograph alone was not enough. The tape alone was not enough. The journal alone was not enough. Hale alone was not enough. But together, they formed a chain stretching from October 18th Sill, 1991, to the courtroom 35 years later. And at the end of that chain was Daniel Mercer. The jury deliberated. 1 hour, 2, 3. Then darkness fell outside the courthouse. The family waited. Reporters waited. Mercer's attorneys waited. Finally, the courtroom doors opened. The jury returned. The foreperson stood. Everyone rose. The judge asked for the verdict. Guilty. James closed his eyes. Laura's photograph remained in his hand. Mercer stared forward. No expression. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. 35 years after Laura Bennett disappeared, the cold case was solved. But when the judge pronounced the sentence, one final question remained unanswered. What happened to the missing evidence? Because prosecutors knew something was still absent. The original recording had been damaged. The financial documents were incomplete, and the final minutes of Laura's life remained uncertain. Then, just as Mercer was being taken away, a deputy approached the prosecutor with an envelope. It had arrived that morning. No return address. Inside was a photograph. The photograph showed Laura's blue Ford Escort, but this one had never been seen before. It had been taken from behind. The timestamp read 12:21, and reflected in the rear window was a figure standing beside the vehicle. Not Mercer. Not Hale. Someone else. Someone the investigators had never identified. The cold case had finally produced a conviction, but the photograph suggested that one person had been present that night whose name had never entered the case, and whoever that person was had waited 35 years before sending the picture back. The photograph arrived at 8:17 on the morning after the verdict. No return address. No fingerprints. No note. Only the photograph. Laura's blue Ford Escort. The abandoned service road. The timestamp in the corner. 12:21 and the figure reflected in the rear window. Detective Aaron Cole stared at it for almost a minute before saying anything. The trial was over. Mercer had been convicted. Laura had been found. Her family finally had an answer. But this photograph created a new question. Who had taken it? The image was sharper than the original photographs from 1991. The photographer had been standing behind another vehicle. The angle suggested the picture was taken from across the road. The figure beside Laura's car was tall, dark clothing, hat pulled low, face hidden by shadow. At first, investigators believed it might be Richard Hale. Then they enlarged the image. The figure was wearing a jacket. On the left sleeve was a distinctive white emblem, a small circular shape. Cole recognized it. He had seen it before, inside the original case file. A photograph of a security uniform. The uniform belonged to Bell County Manufacturing, the same company where Hale worked. But there was a problem. Hale was not the only employee who wore that jacket. There were dozens. The investigation could have ended there. It almost did. Then Cole noticed something else. The person in the photograph was holding a camera, not a phone, not a modern device, a compact 35mm camera, the kind used in 1991. The image had not been taken by accident. Someone had deliberately photographed Laura's car. Someone had watched. Someone had documented what happened. The police reopened the evidence review. They searched every known photograph from the original investigation. The new image was compared with the old one. The road, the trees, the utility pole, the angle of the headlights. Everything matched. The photograph had been taken exactly where the photographer claimed to be, and that meant one thing. Someone had been watching Laura before police arrived. Cole returned to the original witness statements. There was a name he had almost forgotten. Thomas Keene. In 1991, Keene was a night security officer at the manufacturing plant. He had worked the same shift as Hale. He had been interviewed once. His statement was only 6 lines long. He said he saw nothing unusual. He said Hale left the facility briefly. He said he did not know why. Then he went home. That was all. But the employment records showed Keene had been issued a company camera for security documentation. A camera. The same type of camera visible in the photograph. Investigators searched for Keene. He had died in 2007, but his daughter still lived in Texas. She agreed to let detectives search through his belongings. Inside an old wooden cabinet, they found dozens of undeveloped rolls of film. Most were ordinary. Factory equipment. Security incidents. Employee gatherings. Broken machinery. Then one roll had a handwritten date. October 18th, 91. Cole held the roll in his hand. His pulse quickened. The film was developed. The first photographs showed the factory. The second showed the parking lot. The third showed Hale's truck. Then came the photograph of Laura's car, the exact image that had arrived at the courthouse. But there were more. 6 more photographs. The first showed Laura leaving the diner. The second showed Mercer following her. The third showed the blue Escort turning toward the service road. The fourth showed Hale's truck. The fifth showed both vehicles stopped beside the road. And the sixth showed Laura standing outside her car, alive, her face visible, her hands raised. She appeared to be arguing with Mercer. Then came the final photograph. Laura was no longer standing. She was on the ground. Mercer was beside her. Hale was standing near the truck. And behind them, barely visible near the tree line, was Thomas Keene. He had been there. He had witnessed the confrontation. He had photographed it. And he had said nothing. The detectives now understood why the anonymous photograph had arrived after the verdict. Keene had been dead for 19 years. His daughter had found the film only after investigators searched his belongings. But the question remained, why had Keene taken the photograph? The answer was inside his personal notebook. His daughter handed it to Cole. Most entries were routine. Dates, shifts, equipment numbers. Then October 18th. Mercer and Hale are meeting again. The next line was scratched out. Below it, something is wrong. October 19th. Photograph them. Then, need to decide whether to report. The next pages were blank. Until November. I can't do this. Then December. They know I saw. Cole read the entries again. Keene had been afraid, but there was another discovery. A payment. Bank records showed Keene received a large cash deposit 3 days after Laura disappeared. The amount was substantial for a security guard. The deposit came from an account connected to Foster. The 3 men had not only been involved, They had been protecting each other. Keene had been paid to remain silent. But why did he keep the photographs? Maybe he intended to use them as insurance. Maybe he planned to expose them if they threatened him. Maybe he simply could not destroy the evidence. Whatever the reason, he kept it for 16 years. Then he died. His family inherited the box. Nobody knew what was inside. Until now. The discovery did not change Mercer's conviction. It strengthened it. But it changed the story of Laura's final night. There had been 4 men connected to the scene: Mercer, Hale, Foster, Keene, and each had played a different role. Mercer had orchestrated the confrontation. Hale had helped. Foster had provided equipment and helped conceal evidence. Keene had watched, then accepted money to remain silent. The case was bigger than anyone had understood in 1991, but there was still one mystery. The photograph showed Laura standing beside her car at 12:18, then on the ground, then inside the truck. But there was no photograph of the barn, no photograph of the burial, no photograph of Laura after the truck left the road. The missing section of the story remained. Investigators searched Keene's belongings again. This time they found a cassette, different from Laura's recording, different label, different handwriting. The cassette was marked after. The tape contained approximately 9 minutes of audio. The first minute was static, then an engine, a truck door, footsteps, Keene's voice. He was breathing heavily. He whispered, "They took her." Then another voice, "Mercer, you shouldn't be here." Keene answered, "I saw everything." Mercer said nothing. Then Hale spoke, "Daniel, we need to leave." Keene said, "She was still alive." Silence. Then Mercer, "Not anymore." The recording ended. Cole listened to it 3 times. There was no ambiguity. Mercer knew Laura had been alive. He knew she had died. And he knew Keene had witnessed the aftermath. The tape was authenticated. The voices were analyzed. The recording was real, but it also revealed something terrifying. Keene had been at the barn. He had arrived after Laura was taken there. He had witnessed the aftermath. He had recorded the conversation. Then he accepted money and remained silent. The investigation had uncovered another failure. Not only had the police missed clues, witnesses had deliberately concealed them. People had chosen silence. Laura's family had spent 35 years searching while others lived with pieces of the truth. The prosecutor contacted James Bennett. She told him about the photographs. James listened quietly. Then he asked one question. Was she alive in the picture? The prosecutor said yes. James closed his eyes. He had spent years imagining the final moment. Now he knew. Laura had been alive at 12:18, alive when Mercer confronted her, alive when Hale watched, alive when Keene photographed her, and alive when they took her away. The new evidence did not bring comfort. It brought pain. But James said something unexpected. Then she was still fighting. That became the family as focus. Not how Laura died, not the men who betrayed her, but the fact that she fought. She tried to call police. She recorded Mercer. She wrote instructions. She warned someone. She fought until the end. And even after death, the evidence she left behind kept fighting for her. The investigation continued. Prosecutors considered additional charges against Foster. Keene was dead. Hale remained under indictment. Mercer was already serving his sentence. But investigators wanted to know whether other people had helped conceal the crime. They reopened the financial records. They traced payments. They found several unexplained deposits, small amounts, different accounts, different dates, all connected to people who had been around Mercer in 1991. Some were dead. Some had moved. Some refused to speak. One name appeared repeatedly. A woman, Patricia Vaughn. In 1991, she worked at the manufacturing plant. She had access to employee records. She had also dated Mercer briefly. She had been interviewed after Laura disappeared. Her statement said she had not seen Mercer that week, but bank records told a different story. 3 days after Laura disappeared, Vaughn received cash. A week later, she moved to another state. She never returned. Detectives located her in Colorado. She was 80 years old. When they showed her Laura's photograph, she began crying. Then she said, "I knew she was going to die." The investigators asked what she meant. Vaughn said Mercer had told her that Laura had become a problem. She said she warned him to leave Laura alone. He refused. She claimed she did not know exactly what he planned, but she knew he was dangerous. Then she revealed something else. Laura had visited her 2 days before the disappearance. Laura had asked about Mercer. She wanted to know why his name kept appearing in company record. Vaughn had told her to stay away. Laura had asked why. Vaughn refused to answer. That conversation became the missing link between the financial scheme and the murder. Laura had not stumbled into the danger by accident. She had been investigating. She had been asking questions. And someone had warned her. But the warning came too late. The detectives asked Vaughn why she never contacted police. She said she was afraid. She had a child. She had no money. Mercer had influence. And everyone around him seemed to know something. She said, "I thought someone else would stop him." No one did. That sentence became the final lesson of the case. A murder does not always survive because one person is clever. Sometimes it survives because everyone around the truth is afraid to touch it. One person lies. Another stays quiet. Another accepts money. Another looks away. Another tells themselves it is not their responsibility, and the truth becomes buried beneath layers of silence. Laura's case had survived for 35 years because of those layers, but now they were collapsing, one witness at a time, one photograph at a time, one forgotten document at a time. The cold case had been solved. The suspect had been arrested. The conviction had been secured. Yet the investigation was still producing evidence. And then, 3 weeks after the verdict, detectives received one final package. It came from an unknown sender. Inside was a cassette tape. No label. No explanation. The audio began with Laura. Her voice was calm. Not frightened. Not crying. She was speaking to someone. And what she said suggested that she knew much more about Daniel Mercer than investigators had ever realized. She named a location, a date, and one final name. Then the recording ended. That name did not belong to Mercer. It did not belong to Hale. It did not belong to Foster. It belonged to someone who had never been arrested. Someone who, according to Laura's own voice, had been involved long before October 18th. And for the first time since the case began, investigators had to consider a possibility even more disturbing than the murder itself. Laura may have been investigating something far larger than the financial scheme. She may have been close to exposing a network. And the men already convicted may have been only the people standing between her and the truth.